Hello, this is Mark Ryer, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the February 5th issue of the New York Times and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. All right, let's start off the first article today. Surge in immigration cases in Minnesota pushes prosecutors and judges to the brink. Remarks by a prosecutor opened a revealing window into how the courts in the state are buckling under the weight of a deluge of cases arising from the Trump administration's campaign. When it all became too much, the crippling caseload, the lack of training, and most of all, the immigrants themselves who had been languishing in jail, Juliet T. Lee let loose in front of the judge. Ms. Lee, a prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, knew that he was angry. She understood that she and her colleagues had violated his orders to release people illegally detained in the state last month. But she had already tried to quit her job, and no one would replace her. So what else could she do? This system sucks. This job sucks, Ms. Lee exclaimed. While she wanted to improve things, she was just one person, she explained, working around the clock to grapple with the onslaught of cases and stemming from the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Fixing a broken system, I don't have a magic button to do it, she said. I don't have the power or the voice to do it. I only can do it within the ability and the capacity that I have. Ms. Lee's outburst on Tuesday at a hearing in the Federal District Court of St. Paul was an extraordinary expression of personal frustration from a lawyer on the front lines of the White House's aggressive immigration sweeps. The remarks cost her her job at the Justice Department, where she had been working working on a temporary basis to help handle habeas corpus petitions or court filings that compel the government to justify holding someone in custody. But they also opened a window into a broader problem: how the courts in Minnesota are buckling beneath the weight of a deluge of cases arising from the statewide campaign that the administration has called Operation Metro Surge. The turmoil in the courts has demoralized prosecutors, outraged judges, exhausted defense lawyers, and left many immigrants languishing in detention in violation of court orders. The individuals affected are people, said Jerry Blackwell, the federal judge who convened Tuesday's hearing. They live in their communities. Some are separated from their families. When agencies like the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement ignore judicial orders to release immigrants under their control, Judge Blackwell said, it is an affront not merely to personal liberties, but to the entire criminal justice system. The DOJ, the DHS, and ICE are not above the law, the judge declared. They do wield extraordinary power, and that power has to exist within constitutional limits. The hearing was held so that Judge Blackwell could grill Ms. Lee and her supervisor in the U.S. Attorney's Office about why they had ignored his orders in cases in which he had determined that immigrants had been illegally detained by federal agents, while the men, who all eventually released from federal custody, the judge wanted to get to the bottom of the government's non-compliance in missing court-imposed deadlines. Lawyers for some of the immigrants had asked him to hold the administration in contempt. And while Judge Blackwell did not immediately do so, Ms. Lee, in a darkly sardonic moment, said she would not have minded if he did. I wish you would just hold me in contempt, Your Honor, so that I could have a full 24 hours of sleep, she said. If rogue judges followed the law in adjudicating cases and respected the government's obligation to properly prepare cases, there wouldn't be an overwhelming habeas corpus caseload or concern over DHS following orders, said Natalie Baldessar, a Justice Department spokeswoman. The level of illegal aliens currently detained is a direct result of this administration's stronger border security policies to keep the American people safe. The increasingly loud warnings that the Trump administration's immigration policies are overloading the federal judiciary extend beyond Judge Blackwell's courtroom. Last week, Patrick Schills, the chief federal judge in Minnesota, exonerated the administration for what he said were nearly 100 violations of court orders stemming from the Homeland Security Department, their aggressive crackdown in Minnesota, or in Minneapolis, which has led to the fatal shootings of 2 protesters at the hands of federal agents. But a growing chorus of judges around the country have also raised concerns about the wave of cases brought on by the government's immigration raids. In the Western District of Texas, Judge Leon Skytlauer noted that as of last week, 134 habeas cases related to immigrants were pending in his court, and 20 to 25 new ones were arriving each week. In West Virginia, Judge Joseph Goodwin used a ruling late last month ordering the release of a Venezuelan immigrant to complain about the wider problem of immigrants being held in violation of their rights. Individuals are stopped during ordinary civilian activity, taken into custody for civil immigration purposes, and confined in local jails without prompt hearings, without individualized findings, and often far from counsel, family, or community, he wrote. 2 days after Judge Goodwin issued his order, Judge Fred Beery of the Western District of Texas issued his own fiery ruling that freed 5-year-old Liam Ramos, who was arrested with his father in Minnesota. Judge Beery included a photo of Liam standing in the cold, wearing a blue bunny hat, as he was taken into custody. But the situation has been particularly acute in Minnesota, where hundreds of immigrants have been arrested in recent weeks. Pascal Nawacha, an immigration lawyer in the state, said he and his staff had fought for weeks to keep track of their clients, refreshing an ICE detainee tracker for updates on their whereabouts. In one instance, he watched a client sent to El Paso via Torrance County, New Mexico, after a judge had ordered his release and return to Minnesota. After the man was returned, more than a week later, Judge John Tunheim noted that the government had willfully violated the court's orders in failing to send him back to Minnesota in time for a hearing. I feel so sorry for these lawyers because they are caught because they can't control what their clients are doing, Mr. Nawacha said, referring to the Justice Department lawyers representing the Trump administration. At the federal courthouse in St. Paul on Tuesday, Judge Blackwell started the hearing by discussing the case of an immigrant named Oscar Alevdia Tatchak, whom he had ordered to be freed from custody on January 15th. But instead of immediately complying, ICE officials flew him first to El Paso and then to Albuquerque. Finally, after repeated exhortations from the judge, Ms. Lee told him that the man would return to Minnesota as a free man on January 27th. Not long after, however, prosecutors asked for one more day to bring him back, saying there were safety concerns with his flight. Judge Blackwell blamed overreach by the Trump administration for this chaos and confusion, saying that officials had failed to put enough legal infrastructure in place to keep up with it all. Okay, let's move on to the next article. Brad Karp resigns as Paul Weiss chairman amid Epstein fallout. The decision followed the release of a series of embarrassing emails between Mr. Karp and Jeffrey Epstein. Brad Karp, the longtime chairman of Paul Weiss, one of the nation's top corporate law firms, suddenly resigned on Wednesday evening after a series of embarrassing emails between him and Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier, became public in recent days. The law firm's statement announcing Mr. Karp's resignation as chairman gave no explanation for his decision, but it included a quote from him saying, "Recent reporting has created a distraction and has placed a focus on me that is not in the best interest of the firm." In recent weeks, top business executives, academics, and politicians have faced negative attention because of email and text conversations they had with Mr. Epstein long after he pled guilty in 2008 for soliciting prostitution from a minor girl and registered as a sex offender. Paul Weiss, with more than 1,200 lawyers, represents some of the biggest companies in the world, such as Amazon, ExxonMobil, and the National Football League. The firm also has a reputation for providing pro bono work to organizations that support the indigent and immigrants. Mr. Karp's resignation after 18 years as the chairman ends a tough stretch for one of Wall Street's most influential and well-connected lawyers. Last March, Mr. Karp faced intense scrutiny within the legal community, and Paul Weiss, after the firm reached a deal with President Trump to sidestep an executive order that could have harmed its business by effectively barring the firm from representing clients before the federal government. The deal was widely seen in the legal community as a capitulation to Mr. Trump, and several high-profile partners left Paul Weiss, but Mr. Karp had appeared to weather the storm. That changed this weekend when emails released by the Department of Justice showed that Mr. Karp had been a guest at Mr. Epstein's New York mansion and had exchanged emails with him on a number of occasions. Mr. Karp had come to know Mr. Epstein largely through his legal work for the billionaire Leon Black, a co-founder of the private equity firm Apollo Global Management. Mr. Black paid Mr. Epstein nearly $170 million for tax and estate planning advice, and his businesses and social dealings with Mr. Epstein have long been a source of controversy. But the email revealed that Mr. Karp had socialized with Mr. Epstein and at one point had asked Mr. Epstein for help landing his son a job on a Woody Allen movie. After attending a dinner that included Mr. Allen and at Mr. Epstein's Manhattan Mansion in 2015, Mr. Karp sent Mr. Epstein an email thanking him for an evening I'll never forget. He also called Mr. Epstein an extraordinary host and told him that he was amazing. In recent days, some lawyers at Paul Weiss privately expressed anger and embarrassment about the emails, said a lawyer at the firm who did not want to be identified, speaking about an internal business. Some Paul Weiss lawyers were also upset that Mr. Karp had received an email in which Mr. Epstein suggested that Mr. Black retain a private investigator to surveil a former mistress, according to one top Paul Weiss lawyer who spoke on the condition of remaining anonymous. Mr. Karp released a statement on Monday saying he regretted his interactions with Mr. Epstein. He added that he had attended 2 group dinners in New York City, and had a small number of social interactions by email, all of which he regrets. Mr. Karp, who will remain at Paul Weiss as a spokesman for Mr. Black, did not respond to a request for comment. Leading Paul Weiss for the past 18 years has been the honor of my professional life, Mr. Karp said in the firm's statement on Wednesday. Taking over as chairman is Scott Barchet, the head of the firm's lucrative corporate practice. In a statement on Wednesday announcing his appointment, Paul Weiss said Mr. Barchet had over 30 years of advising boards of directors and management teams on some of the most complex and high-profile legal matters. Mr. Barchet joined Paul Weiss in 2016 from Cravath, another top corporate law firm. His ascent to chairman reflects how Paul Weiss has morphed from being one of the nation's premier litigation firms to one that focuses increasingly on corporate law for large companies, with trial work becoming less important. In deciding to settle with the White House, Mr. Karp explained to the firm's lawyers that the restrictions proposed by the Trump administration, like preventing Paul Weiss lawyers from entering federal buildings, would have prevented Paul Weiss from effectively representing its clients. But the settlement rankled many of the firm's top litigators who wanted to challenge the White House's executive order in court. The episode exposed tensions between Paul Weiss's litigators and its corporate dealmakers, like Mr. Barchet, who had gained more prominence. Mr. Karp repeatedly defended the deal, saying the survival of the firm depended on it. Criticism of his decision only grew, however, when the handful of law firms that challenged Mr. Trump's executive order easily prevailed in court. On Wednesday, Paul Weiss said in its statement that Mr. Karp will continue to focus his full-time attention to client services at the firm. Okay, next, one more article considering the Epstein case. Starmer faces storm of criticism over ties between ex-ambassador and Epstein. Newly released documents detailed connections between the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, who was picked to be the U.S. envoy by the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain on Thursday tried to dampen a wave of anger from lawmakers in his own party, and even some calls for him to step down, after new revelations about the friendship between his former ambassador to the United States and the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Before a pre-planned speech on poverty in southern England, the Prime Minister accused the former ambassador, Peter Mandelson, of deceit, adding, "None of us knew the depth of the darkness of that relationship." He vowed to hold Mr. Mandelstein accountable and apologize to Mr. Epstein's victims. "I want to say this," he said. "I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed this man's lies and appointed him. I'm sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold in public once again." Under intense questioning in Parliament on Wednesday, Mr. Starmer, the Labour Party leader, admitted that he had been aware of a relationship between Mr. Epstein and Mr. Mandelson when appointing Mr. Mandelson to the diplomatic post at the end of 2024. But Mr. Starmer accused Mr. Mandelson, a veteran Labour Party politician, of litany of deceit about the extent of the friendship. "He's betrayed our country," a visibly angry Mr. Starmer told the House of Commons. The explanation has done little to subdue a surge of questions by Mr. Starmer's critics about whether he failed to exercise good judgment in hiring Mr. Mandelson. Several members of Parliament from Mr. Starmer's party came close to saying that he should consider stepping down. I think that he needs to think very hard about what is in the country's best interest, what is in his party's best interest. Barry Gardiner, one of those lawmakers, told the BBC on Wednesday night. When Mr. Gardiner was asked whether that was a yes on stepping down, he remained silent for several moments. John McDonnell, another Labour Party member of Parliament, told the broadcaster ITV, "I think he should consider his track record. Is he performing the role responsibly? And I think the responsibility is on his shoulders to think whether he's doing the right thing by staying on." Mr. Starmer, whose party swept into power 18 months ago, had already been struggling with record low approval ratings amid a faltering economy and repeated flip-flops by his government. The Prime Minister's Labour allies are fearful that the latest scandal could do even more to drag them down the party's fortunes in a special election scheduled for this month, and in elections in Wales and Scotland in the spring. Among the huge number of files released last week by the U.S. Justice Department, were ones detailing how Mr. Mandelson had leaked sensitive documents to Mr. Epstein, had appeared to accept money from the disgraced financier, and had engaged in numerous crude exchanges. News headlines on Thursday morning were among the most brutal Mr. Starmer has faced since moving into number 10 Downing Street. Labour MPs say Starmer's days as Prime Minister are numbered, The Guardian wrote. The Times of London's headline read, "Starmer in serious trouble over Mandelson's Epstein leaks." The Sun, a tabloid, called the swirling scandal Mr. Starmer's Days of Reckoning. The Mandelson-Epstein story shows no signs of abating. In one of the newly released documents written in 2009, just after Mr. Epstein was released from prison, Mr. Mandelson wrote, "How is Freedom feeling?" Mr. Epstein replied, "She feels fresh, firm, and creamy." To which Mr. Mandelson wrote, "Naughty boy." Mr. Mandelson has said in the past that he regrets his association with Mr. Epstein, but that he has never done anything against the law. Mr. Starmer had already fired Mr. Mandelson in September when evidence first emerged that he and Mr. Epstein were close. But after Mr. Mandelson's name appeared thousands of times in last week's huge release of Epstein files, Mr. Starmer went further under pressure from members of the opposition Tory party and Labour lawmakers. First, Mr. Mandelson was pushed to resign from the Labour Party. Then, Mr. Starmer forced Mr. Mandelson to give up his membership in the House of Lords. And on Tuesday, the Prime Minister referred Mr. Mandelson to the police for possible criminal prosecution for revealing government secrets. On Wednesday, Mr. Starmer agreed to go yet further by saying that he would release previously private communications between members of his government during the time that Mr. Mandelson was named U.S. Ambassador. Mr. Starmer's allies said that the communications would show that Mr. Mandelson had lied to them when his appointment was being considered. Mandelson made out that relationship barely existed, that they hardly knew each other. The British Housing Secretary Steve Reed told LBC Radio. "We need to look at the documents that will show the extent to which Peter Mandelson was lying." But that effort has stalled after the Metropolitan Police issued a statement urging the government not to release any communications that might interfere with the investigation that Mr. Starmer initiated this week. As with any investigation, securing and preserving any potential evidence is vital, Commander Ella Marriott of the Metropolitan Police said in a statement. We therefore ask them not to release certain documents at this time. In his speech on Thursday, Mr. Starmer said that he wanted to release more of the communications, but that he would not do anything to imperil the investigation. I will not take any step, however politically tempting, however popular, that risks justice for victims, because this is not and must never become a political game, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Okay, moving on to the next article. Trump says his unpredictable style gives him leverage, but it has a cost. A year into President Trump's second term, his threats, retreats, twists, and turns appear to be wearing on allies and adversaries. President Trump, who considers himself a master deal maker, has never made any secret of his belief that the secret to winning at negotiation is to keep the other side off balance. But a year into his second term, his act is starting to wear on both allies and adversaries, some of whom are starting to view him as so miracle and unreliable that they appear willing to consider waiting him out or turning away from him rather than enduring the abrupt starts, stops, and humiliations that can accompany engaging with him. In foreign policy, tariffs, immigration, and his pressure campaign on universities, Mr. Trump's threats, retreats, twists, and turns have left negotiating partners feeling at times that they are being used to score political points, and that there is little purpose to engaging on substance when his moods and demands can shift in an instant. What Trump is identifying as unpredictability is actually anxiety about his electoral prospects, said Timothy O'Brien, a biographer of Mr. Trump. He's aware that he's going into a possibly daunting midterm election, and he's throwing these Hail Mary passes in order to try to cultivate voters to demonstrate that he's in charge, to seek retribution from perceived enemies, but I don't think it has anything to do with unpredictability in the service of great deal making, he said. After seeming to break a logjam in long-stalled negotiations with Harvard University, Mr. Trump abruptly reversed course, withdrawing his agreement not to seek a $200 million fine from the school and instead demanding that it pay $1 billion. The White House called it part of the normal back and forth of negotiations, but it strengthened the hand of those at Harvard who say the school should not agree to the president's demands. After threatening to seize Greenland from Denmark, Mr. Trump abruptly backed down, but not before infuriating allies suggested that it was time to stop thinking of the United States as a reliable partner. Last month, Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada traveled to China for a landmark state visit, during which he and President Xi of China announced that they would slash tariffs. In terms of the way that our relationship has progressed in recent months with China, it is more predictable, and you see results coming from that, Mr. Carney said. He then gave a speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where he said there had been a rupture in the world order. He did not name Mr. Trump, but it was clear that he blamed him for the hostilities. I will talk today about the breaking of the world order, the end of a pleasant fiction and the beginning of a brutal reality where the geopolitics of the great powers is not subject to any constraint, Mr. Carney had said in Davos. White House officials say Mr. Trump's negotiating style has yielded results, pointing to new trade deals and peace deals he secured over the last year. They also taught the president's efforts to secure lower drug prices for Americans and the agreements he has made with 7 higher education institutions. The one thing that isn't changing in 2026 is dealmaker-in-chief President Trump consistently proving the naysayers wrong about his ability to leverage the powers of the presidency and America's might to secure better deals for the American people. Kush Desi, the White House spokesman, said in a statement. Still, even some of Mr. Trump's allies privately concede that his penchant for unpredictability has drawbacks, most often for the economy. The president dangles trade wars with frequency. President Trump allies concede that his penchant for unpredictability has drawbacks, most often for the economy. The president dangles trade wars with frequency, and when he is peeved, tariffs are often doled out as threats on social media. So even when a deal is struck, the other parties are never fully sure Mr. Trump will not try to change the terms. Particularly on trade, it can appear that escalation or easing of tensions is subject simply to the president's whims. That approach has made countries less confident that the United States will do what it says it will do, pushing them toward each other and, critically, towards China. As Mr. Trump often says, I don't rule out anything. Okay, next article. Supreme Court clears way for California voting map. The state's Republican Party has asked the justice to step in and block the new congressional maps, which give an advantage to Democrats before the midterms. The Supreme Court on Wednesday cleared the way for California to use a new congressional map designed to help Democrats for midterm elections. The justices rejected an emergency request by the California Republican Party to override the federal court and block the map before the November vote. The decision is a victory for Democrats and who has devised a plan after Mr. Trump pushed Republican-led states to redraw their maps to help the GOP pick up seats in the election. The unsigned order did not include a vote count or the court's reasoning, which is typical in such emergency decisions. Donald Trump said he was entitled to 5 more congressional seats in Texas, Governor Gavin Newsom of California said in a statement on Wednesday. He started this redistricting war. He lost, and he'll lose again in November. The dispute is the latest challenge to a state congressional map to come before the justices in recent months. In December, the Supreme Court cleared the way for Texas to use its new congressional voting map for the midterm elections. Texas Republican leaders had asked the court to weigh in after a divided panel of federal judges had temporarily blocked the map, which was designed to help the GOP potentially pick up seats. In a concurring opinion in the Texas case, Justice Samuel Alito nodded to efforts to gain a partisan advantage by both parties before the midterms, writing that it was indisputable that the impetus for the adoption of the Texas map, like the map subsequently adopted in California, was partisan advantage pure and simple. Courts have said it is legal to gerrymander based on party politics as opposed to race. An attorney for the California Republican Party said the party will continue to fight its underlying case in the lower court, even though it did not win the emergency injunction it sought to block the new maps this year. The federal district court applied a standard that would permit any state to use a racially gerrymandered election district map if the voters approved the map without knowing what their officials had done. According to a statement from Michael Colombo, an attorney representing the California Republican Party. This is a novel interpretation of the law that we believe is incorrect and dangerous. The fight over redistricting began in the summer when Mr. Trump pushed Governor Greg Abbott of Texas to redraw the state's congressional districts to add Republican seats in hopes of maintaining control of the House of Representatives. California lawmakers quickly responded with a redistricting effort of their own. In August, Mr. Newsom signed two distincting bills and declared a special election to ask the state's voters to approve a new voting map, which could help Democrats flip 5 seats and bolster 4 swing seats with more Democrat-leaning voters. Hours after the state's voters overwhelmingly approved the plan in November, leaders of the California Republican Party sued. A divided 3-judge panel in federal court in Los Angeles upheld the map. A district judge, Josephine Staton, writing for the majority, said the evidence showed that the state's new map was exactly what it was billed as, a political gerrymander designed to flip 5 Republican seats to the Democrats. The California Republican Party quickly appealed to the Supreme Court. In a brief to the justices, the challengers argued that under the guise of partisan line drawing, California had expressly used race in drawing up its map, a penchant and unconstitutional action. Lawyers for the Trump administration weighed in with a brief supporting the state Republican Party. Solicitor General John Sauer asserted that the justices should treat California's map as different from the Texas map because California's map was tainted by an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Mr. Sauer argued that the state's new district boundaries had been drawn to bolster Latino voters. In response to the emergency application, Mr. Newsom and Secretary of State Shirley Weber, both Democrats, denied that the map had been drawn to give an advantage to Latinos. They pointed out that the number of Latino majority districts in the state remained unchanged under the new map. The state leaders said in their brief that it would be strange for California to redistrict to help Latino voters and then adopt a map with the same number of majority Latino districts. They urged the justices not to block the state's map on a hurried timetable with limited briefing, where the requested relief would nullify the choice of millions of voters and displace state election laws in the middle of an active primary campaign. The order served as a reminder that the justices have yet to rule on a broader challenge to how states draw legislative districts. Earlier in the term, they heard argument in a major challenge to Louisiana's voting map, weighing whether lawmakers' use of race as a factor in drafting the state's congressional map violated the Constitution. Through their lawyers, the plaintiffs in that case, a group of white Louisiana voters who had challenged the map, weighed in with a brief to ask the justices to temporarily block the California map. They claimed that it, too, was an illegal racial gerrymander and urged the court to act, even with an election looming. Okay, next article. What we know about the disappearance of Savannah Guthrie's mother. Nancy Guthrie, 84, the Today Show's host's mother, was last seen on Saturday night, the authorities said. The disappearance is being investigated as a possible kidnapping. The authorities in Arizona are searching for Nancy Guthrie, 84, the mother of the Today Show's anchor Savannah Guthrie, who has been missing since Sunday and whose disappearance is being investigated as a possible kidnapping. Ms. Guthrie was last seen at her home near Tucson on Saturday night around 9:30 p.m., according to Chris Nanos, the Pima County Sheriff. At a news conference on Tuesday, he described her disappearance as an abduction. We do believe that Nancy was taken from her home against her will. Here's what we know. Nancy Guthrie missed church on Sunday. When Miss Guthrie did not show up at her regular Sunday church service, a friend notified her family. Sheriff Nanos said, when the family members went to Miss Guthrie's home and did not find her there, they called 911. The authorities responded at noon on Sunday and brought in a search and rescue team, volunteers, dogs, drones, and a helicopter to help find her. Sheriff Nanos described Ms. Guthrie's home as a crime scene at a news briefing on Monday, adding that we saw some things at the home that concerned us, without offering more details. He added that Ms. Guthrie had limited mobility and requires medication every 24 hours and could die without it. Ms. Guthrie was described in a missing persons notice as 5'5" tall, with brown hair and blue eyes, and vulnerable. The authorities described her as mentally sharp and said it was not a dementia-related case. The Guthries are ready to talk. The search for Miss Guthrie was growing more urgent as it entered its fourth day on Wednesday. The Pima County Sheriff's Department said it did not yet have a strong lead and pleaded for help from the public. Time is not on our side, Sheriff Nanos said in an interview on Tuesday. Late Wednesday night, Savannah Guthrie said in an emotional video posted online that she and her siblings were ready to listen to ransom offers from whoever might have abducted their mother, Nancy, over the weekend, but that the family would first need proof that she was still alive. In the video, Ms. Guthrie tried to hold back tears as she sat between her older siblings, Annie and Cameron, and read from notes. She said her family had heard about possible ransom letters that had been sent to news outlets. We are ready to talk, she said. However, we live in a world where voices and images are easily manipulated. We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her. The Sheriff's Department said on Tuesday that it was aware of reports circulating about possible ransom notes, after the celebrity news site TMZ said it had received one on Tuesday demanding a Bitcoin payment. An anchor for KOLD, the CBS affiliate in Tucson, said the station had also received a ransom note. It was not clear if those messages were sent by anyone believed to be involved in the abduction. Excuse me. The Sheriff's Department emphasized on Wednesday that investigators have not identified a suspect or person of interest in this case. Detectives continue to speak with anyone who may have had contact with Ms. Guthrie, it said in a statement. Sheriff Nanos said Tuesday that investigators had taken DNA samples from Ms. Guthrie's home, but it could be several days before the samples produce conclusive evidence. Investigators said they had not ruled out the possibility that Ms. Guthrie was targeted. Ms. Guthrie has appeared in several Today Show segments. Ms. Guthrie has periodically appeared on Today Show segments along with her daughter Savannah. In 2022, Savannah Guthrie marked her mother's 80th birthday on the Today Show broadcast, praising her grit and resilience. She's quick and she's smart. She's well read. She's curious about everything, Savannah Guthrie had said of her mother during the 2022 tribute. Savannah Guthrie's father died of a heart attack when she was 16. When she and her sister, Annie, began college, they both opted to live at home. One of us would always stay home on one of the weekend nights so that my mom wouldn't be alone, Savannah Guthrie wrote in 2021. When Nancy Guthrie turned 70, the Today anchors surprised her with a phone call during a live broadcast. And last fall, Savannah Guthrie toured Tucson, her hometown, for a Today Show segment in which she says that her mother moved there in the 1970s. Nancy Guthrie lives in Catalina Foothills, an unincorporated community just north of Tucson that is nestled against the Santa Catalina Mountains. Homes there tend to be more expensive than others in the area because of the views. Many houses are on large lots surrounded by desert, including vegetation like saguaro, prickly pear cactuses, and thick desert shrubs. Savannah Guthrie withdrew from NBC's Olympic coverage. Savannah Guthrie, 54, is best known as one of the anchors of the NBC morning show Today, a job she has held since 2012. After working in local news and as a lawyer, she joined NBC News in 2007. She worked for the network as a White House correspondent, filled in on Meet the Press, and anchored NBC Nightly News. She was born in Australia and moved with her family to Tucson, where she grew up and attended college. She lives in New York with her husband, the communications consultant Michael Feldman, and their 2 children. She has also written children's books. NBC Sports announced on Tuesday that she would not travel to Italy, where she had been expected to play a key role in the coverage of the Milan Cortina Olympics. Mary Carrillo will take Ms. Guthrie's place alongside Terry Gannon as a host of the network's coverage of the opening ceremony on Friday. Tom Lamas, the NBC Nightly News anchor, said in a special report that President Trump spoke with Ms. Guthrie by phone on Wednesday, and that Mr. Trump offered words of support for her and her family and as they search for her mother. Ms. Guthrie, who has been absent from the Today Show this week, has asked for prayers for her followers on Instagram. "Bring her home," she wrote on Tuesday. All right, one more article for today. After taking on Trump and backing Mamdani, Hochul sees her star rise. Governor Kathy Hochul has warded off most serious challenges to her reelection, but still faces a primary contest against her lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado. 1 year ago, Governor Hochul's popularity was plummeting, rivals from the left and right were circling, and her path to reelection looked bumpy. 2 Republican House members were weighing challenges, eager to press their party's momentum after President Trump's election. Representative Richie Torres, a Democrat, was also contemplating a bid, and Democrats to his left questioned if Ms. Hochul, a moderate from Western New York, was the right person to respond to MAGA sentiment. Even Ms. Hochul's own deputy, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, had severed ties with her, announcing that he would not be her reelection ticket and had begun gearing up to challenge her in the Democratic primary. Now, with the election 9 months away, Ms. Hochul is heading to Syracuse for the state Democratic Party convention on Friday in a somewhat surprising position of strength. 2 Republican bids fizzled. Representative Elise Stefanik dropped out, and Representative Mike Lawler's challenge never materialized. Mr. Torres similarly ruled out running. The only serious candidates left standing are Bruce Blakeman, the Republican Nassau County executive, and Mr. Delgado, who entered the race in June. He hoped to capitalize on the energy that fueled Zohran Mamdani's rise to become mayor of New York City. He said that the election showed that people really want bold, transformational change, instead of the clubby political system that he said Ms. Hochul embodies. These are new voters, first-time voters, young voters, immigrant communities that have come out now and often been overlooked, he said. And he added, the socialist wing of the Democratic Party is now activated. He asserted that the governor had completely overlooked these constituencies. But the forces most opposed to Ms. Hochul have failed to coalesce behind Mr. Delgado, in large measure because of the governor's actions and outreach. Since Mr. Trump re-entered office last year, Ms. Hochul has emerged as a capable defender of New York State against the president's threats. She fought the Trump administration's attempt to kill the congestion pricing program in New York City, even after she had initially wavered on its implementation and lowered its tolls. She also defended several large wind projects that Mr. Trump opposed. She has taken several actions to counteract what she said was an unprecedented escalation in aggressive federal immigration enforcement, and she has continued to emphasize affordability in her own messaging, a tactic that would seem to play well with Mr. Mamdani's supporters. Governor Hochul and her team are attempting to address the affordability crisis for New Yorkers, said Jasmine Gripper, co-director of the New York Working Families Party, which will hold its endorsement convention on Saturday. Of course, they also took note of the enthusiasm around Zohran's win. Part of Ms. Hochul's calculus is determining how far she can lean into the Mamdani wave while still staying true to her roots as a centralist Democrat from Western New York. Unlike many other moderate Democrats, Ms. Hochul cautiously endorsed Mr. Mamdani last fall, saying that they shared a set of priorities despite profound areas of disagreement. Their relationship was evident last month when they stood together and announced a plan to expand child care access for children ages 2 and up within 4 years in New York City. The goal is to set the state on a path to universal child care statewide. Mr. Mamdani is expected to endorse Ms. Hochul as early as Thursday, several people familiar with the matter had said. His support signals to his supporters that despite their ambivalence, Ms. Hochul offers the best chance of achieving the ambitious goals he has set forth. She actually has been smart about Trump, and she's been smart about Mayor Mamdani, said Rebecca Katz, whose firm, Fight Agency, made the Mamdani campaign ads. She contrasted the governor's very good political decision to back Zohran with the way that Democrat leaders in Washington withheld their endorsements. She saw that he is somebody who can move voters, said Ms. Katz. And she is a smart politician, and it is smart to be aligned with the mayor on some core issues. Ms. Hochul's efforts have appeared to quash Mr. Delgado's hopes of attracting influential backers to an insurgency candidacy. I think there's some people who are absolutely loyal to the governor, said Assemblywoman Stephanie Zinnerman, who represents Bedford Stuvanis and Crown Heights in Brooklyn. She said she speaks regularly with Mr. Delgado, but is unlikely to endorse him. I think there are a larger number of people who are like, we just have so much to do this year. We can't be messy. Mr. Delgado has about $1.1 million of cash on hand, and his campaign expects to be eligible for up to $3.5 million in matching funds, the first time a matching program has been available to candidates for governor. It is still far less than the roughly $20 million that Ms. Hochul has in her campaign. The disparity in campaign funds mirrors the gap in the polls. Ms. Hochul is viewed favorably by about half of New Yorkers' voters, according to a poll released by Siena University on Tuesday. It's her highest rating since taking office, and a 10% point increase from about the same time last year. She is beating Mr. Delgado by about 50 percentage points in a head-to-head matchup, according to the survey. Some of his supporters say they are committed to trying to unseat Ms. Hochul, citing her resistance to raising taxes and her support for new natural gas pipelines, issues that Mr. Delgado has raised. Many of us are from frontline communities, and we have been impacted by Sandy and other catastrophic events. Assemblywoman Emily Gallagher, a Democratic socialist who backed Mr. Mamdani and now supports Mr. Delgado, said in a recent campaign rally. We need a governor who's putting them first, not oil and gas companies, and not Donald Trump, who she is making deals with for the messy pipeline that we defeated for 14 years. But Mr. Delgado has not seemed to do enough to cultivate more support from lawmakers like Ms. Gallagher. State Senator Andrew Guarndes, a Democrat, said Mr. Delgado has not come close to matching Ms. Hochul's outreach. When Ms. Hochul was lieutenant governor, she regularly appeared at events in his district, he recalled. And as governor, Ms. Hochul maintained a constructive working relationship with him, even as they sparred over several contentious policy issues. With Mr. Delgado, a former House member whose swing district included moderate portions of the Hudson Valley, that has not been the case. I represent one of the most left-leaning districts in the state. It is the epicenter of the Brooklyn Working Families Party movement, he had said. On paper, I am someone that he should be trying to, if not court, at least try to talk to. I just haven't seen the outreach whatsoever. Mr. Delgado has met repeatedly in recent months with senior members and elected officials from the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, whose support was key to the mayor's victory. He also solicited the backing of former aides and allies to Mr. Mamdani, who is a member of the local DSA chapter. Okay, so you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the February 5th issue of the New York Times. Your reader today has been Mark Reier. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.